All right, we're going to finish up our discussion of Lewis structures for polyatomic ions. So again, I have a group of atoms. In this case, I have 1 sulfur and 3 oxygens. And that structure has, in this case, it has a negative charge, so it's going to gain electrons. It's going to gain 2. All right, so we have sulfur. And so sulfur is in group 16 of my periodic table, so it's going to have 6 valence electrons. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I can see sulfur is going to have 2 lone pairs because there are 2 electrons paired together here, and it has 2 bonding electrons. Then I also have oxygen, which is in the same group as sulfur, so it's also going to have 6 valence electrons. All right, so let's talk about, before we build the structure, what this -2 charge means. So when you have a negative charge, it means we're going to add electrons. And the value of the charge tells me how many we're going to add. So in this case, I have a -2, so we're going to add 2 electrons. Now again, for bookkeeping purposes, I like to add or subtract from the central atom. So since I only have 1 sulfur, sulfur is going to be my central atom. So this atom is going to gain 2 electrons. All right, and we're going to slide this over here so we can build our structure. Now, when I look at sulfur, sulfur has 8 valence electrons. So it has an octet. It really doesn't need to bond anymore. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to have 3 oxygens. So I'm going to slide the one I already have over here. And I'm going to slide these other 2 over here too. And so here's what sulfur is going to do. It's actually going to use its electrons here and here and here for bonding purposes. And so that means oxygen is going to use its electrons as lone pairs. So it's going to scoot around to look like this. So again, these oxygens are going to use its valence electrons it already has as its lone pairs. So 2, 4, and here's number 5 and number 6. So whenever one atom gives both of its electrons to a bond, we refer to this as a coordinate covalent bond. And typically we only really see this when we're trying to form polyatomic ions. Okay, so again, we can draw our Lewis structures either with lines or dots. So let's look at my lines. So sulfur would bond once to each oxygen. And then sulfur, if I'm looking at my dot, my bingo chips has a lone pair. And then each oxygen has 1, 2, 3 lone pairs. Okay. And then remember that since this is a polyatomic ion, you're going to have to put brackets around your structure. And then the charge goes in the upper right-hand corner. And instead of drawing dashes, we can use dots instead. Okay. And again, we're going to need to put My brackets around with the charge on the outside. Okay. So when I look at these atoms around sulfur, we can see that there are 2, 4, 6, 8. So it obeys the octet rule. And if we look at the oxygens, there's 1 pair in bonding, and then the other 3 are lone pairs to give it a total of 8.